full system overview. So I've opened that up, and I'll just walk through kind of what is the Commons Stack and why we need it. So the Commons Stack, I think you guys probably have some understanding of this. So we are not a platform. We're building a library of components that we are hoping can be combined in various ways by any project to create an economy around a cause. So if that cause is the development of token engineering or cleaning up a beach, or it could apply to almost any open source initiative. Or I mean, Giveth is particularly interested in bootstrapping community causes with economies, so that we can scale basically effective human coordination. So we are creating as our MVP, the initial build of the Commons Stack is composed of 4 different components. So we have our augmented bonding curve, which provides that continuous funding mechanism, governance through conviction voting, which I'm not sure, well, I guess you guys had a chance to read through the article even before it was published, sort of a dynamic continuous voting or continuous preference aggregation. We have a escrow module in the Giveth donation app. So in other words, once proposals are listed, they're voted on by the community through conviction voting. Then funds are put in escrow and sent to that proposal through the Giveth donation app. And then to feedback on work that's been done in the Commons, we will be implementing a Commons Analytics dashboard. So that'll tell you, how many community members there are, how many proposals there are, how many proposals have been passed, et cetera, how much funds are in the funding pool, all that kind of stuff. So these 4 components, when you combine them together, can form kind of a minimum viable commons. So we're hoping that projects can come along, and of course these are the first 4 components. There could be 10, there could be 15. We hope to continue development of these various components, which could include different styles of governance, different funding mechanisms. This is just kind of the first basic 4 that we put together, and we are trying to stay lean on this build as well. So we want to iterate quickly and continually ship these components that could be useful for Commons initiatives in the future. So this is just a quick rough sketch. We're getting some of these done up a little bit more professionally, but basically showing that these components can come together to create a Commons. A lot of this is based off of work from Eleanor Ostrom, Michelle Bowens, and a bunch of other Commons researchers. We've been looking into, what are the pain points of current open source and Commons initiatives, and how can we assist them with these new crypto economic mechanisms. One of the main goals of the Commons Stack is also establishing the practice of token engineering. There needs to be a bit more content in here. These documents are between 80 and 90% complete. But one of our biggest initiatives with the Commons Stack is to open source CAD-CAD, which is the simulation and modeling tool coming out of Block Science, and basically creating this sort of framework for robust token engineering design, which in all of our research and conversations with different groups in the field, Block Science and particularly Michael Zargham's research is definitely pushing that forward. So we a large chunk of our funding, initial funding and ongoing funding, will be going to the Block Science team, so that they can continue development of CAD-CAD into a more user-friendly tool. At the moment, it's still pretty bare bones in the Python stack. I mean, it's incredibly useful, it's incredibly powerful, but it does require some background knowledge and complex system design and the Python stack to be able to use at this point in time. So that's one of our main goals, is to make these tools and processes much more accessible to the broader crypto community.
Yeah, and I just want to jive off that a little more, because one of the major components of what we're trying to produce is something that people can fork and iterate off of. And part of doing that in a responsible way is to give them the power of simulating and designing their parameters for these complex systems. It's not like an ICO where it's like, okay, how much do I want to raise? And you know, the parameters don't really matter. For this system, for these systems, they're too complex to just like, you know, pull something out of your ass, unfortunately. So like we need to have an open source CAD, and we need to produce models that people can take and be like, well, I want to change this, and I want to add this thing, this one little thing in, and they can just modify a few things, and then boom, they have their whole simulation ready to go, and they can see what, if it works, if not, and then they can build. And like our goal is to really push token engineering forward, not necessarily on ourselves, but to build out these tools so that other people can take them and run, you know?
Mm-hmm. I mean, just a quick question there, because I guess there is a lot of work around like the community like aspect of it, right? But as you mentioned, it's also the actual tooling. How would you prioritize those?
The tooling is definitely, well, it's kind of a both and thing. There's the target for the Common Stack is to be hyper focused on a specific community when for each launch. So like, you know, the one that we're really looking at is the token engineering community. Now this is like 500 to 1,000 people max, you know, and staying hyper focused on that as opposed to going broad and building them up and making sure that there's enough awareness within that small subgroup about what's happening is really important. But for those people, they can actually use these tools. And that's kind of our launch strategy, is to focus on like helping that community out and giving them the tooling they need to actually work with this stuff. And then eventually iterating and expanding and growing more general, and so that we can bring in the general Ethereum community and then the general crypto community. So, yeah.
Awesome. So just to reiterate, so you're using token engineering ecosystem as, I suppose, like the beachhead of this whole mission, right?
Right. So we've actually, you know, come up against, you know, some difficulty in explaining some of these concepts, even to people already in the crypto space. So, I mean, ultimately, we would love to see these tools used by any commons. We think there are alternative economic paradigms that can come from this kind of organization. However, there's we're a long way from there before we can make these tools easy enough for the general public to use. So, I mean, our first target community, as Griff mentioned, is the token engineering community. They are the people who understand bonding curves, who are, you know, can offer that useful feedback. We can see where these mechanisms fail or have friction points, and as we iterate and make this more useful, we're hoping that it can be used for larger open source and commons initiatives. So the first problem that we're addressing is essentially the tooling and education around complex system design in the crypto space. And essentially, as Griff just mentioned, we would like to create a token engineering commons, which I'll go through kind of our iteration strategy in a moment. We're planning on launching component by component rather than taking, you know, a year or more to produce all 4 components. We plan on launching each component in an iteration strategy, so we can test in a live environment, and we can iterate on that and build a second iteration for another community as we go. But ultimately, our goal is to create this higher level incentive framework for token engineers to all be working towards a common goal with common processes and frameworks to build on. So we're, you know, in all of our conversations, we've found lots of people who are experimenting with bonding curves, with TCRs, with all these kind of like bleeding edge crypto economic primitives, but we haven't really established a base to work from, and we believe that's because of a kind of this disconnect in proper token engineering process. And as we said, the ultimate goal is to address, the open source incentivization issue at its core, and determine ways for humans to collaborate on higher levels.
Just
yeah,
sorry, I'm not sure if you'll touch upon this or later, but so you mentioned that you're going to roll out each of the parts of the stack kind of individually first, right? So reading the roadmap, it seems like first is the bonding curve, and then next is like the give it that, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
And then after that, you'll implement like the conviction voting, and then
Exactly.
last is like the dashboard.
Exactly.
Okay, cool.
Cool. So I drew a couple of quick sketches here just to kind of explain the different phases. So ultimately, the first thing we need to do is build these components. So we're looking for token engineers and governance experts to essentially donate to the Common Stack Association. So that money will go towards building these components. So here's the bonding curve, conviction voting, the Giveth DApp, and the analytics. And what that donation essentially does is it will allow these donors to be on our Token Engineering Commons whitelist. So within the build phase, it is a straight donation. We are avoiding, issuing our own token. We don't want securities issues or anything like that. So we are basically operating off donations to build these components within the build phase, which will take between, I'll get into the iteration phases in a little bit, but that's basically a 2+ year roadmap. And once those components are built, or actually as we launch these iterations, any community that is applicable, so for example, the token engineering community, or maybe a trash cleanup community, whoever wants to use these components because they're open source, we're not controlling who can or can't use them. They're just out there to be forked and used. They can take those components and they can hatch a bonding curve. So essentially how that bonding curve will work, these initial hatchers who consist of the community and the Token Engineering Commons whitelist will initialize the curve. So they buy in at the initial price, P0. And in the hatch phase, that's a one constant price. Then when the curve is initialized, it starts at price P1. And from there, the curve is now in its open phase. And the community can use that as a sustainable funding mechanism. So once the curves hit their open phase, we have our all token holders here, who essentially in the beginning are the community and the Token Engineering Commons whitelist. Whoever decided to initialize that curve are our initial token holders. And we're considering these components kind of like a community center. So this is now a way that the community can manage their funds. They can allocate funding for proposals. Those proposals get worked on by people in the community, and then the feedback comes back to all token holders as to how successful that proposal was, et cetera, et cetera. So the tokens grant governance powers in allocation of funding towards proposals. And the funding proposal goes back to whoever proposed that. Work is done. And of course, the public is open to support or leave this commons as they see fit. So that's kind of the traditional workings of a bonding curve. You can enter or exit the curve and support the community by providing capital. So this is kind of like a co-ownership, co-production, where any token holder, down the line can put forward a proposal, vote on that proposal, receive funding from the community, and do work that produces value for the community.
Yeah, we really expect it to be about bootstrapping. So a community of people who want to do the work already, like in this case, the token engineering community, like Trent, Eden, all these guys, Trent and Simon specifically, right? They're going to be putting funds in likely, but they're also going to be requesting for funds out. And it's really about using this as a financial asset effectively to bootstrap their own value, just as a company does when they go public. But for nonprofit, for entities that don't, or organizations and communities that can't normally like create value economically because the economic models don't attribute value to what they produce, like research or taking care of the less fortunate eventually. But this, they can actually bootstrap their own financial asset and apply for funding from the system that they create.
Just a quick question, because you mentioned that all this will be open sourced and communities will be able to fork it and launch like their own community. Any, I guess, worker thoughts around how these communities will be able to interoperate or work with each other?
That's actually that's what the Giveth DApp provides, which is really
awesome.
Cool, because the Giveth DApp allows you to crowdfund any proposal. So like anyone can make a proposal, and then if it gets added to one community, it could also get added to a second community. And with the integration, the add-on that we're going to add to the Giveth DApp is so that you can see how much conviction power, how much money basically these two communities are going to commit to it, and or what their status is. And it will also incentivize external donation from outside of those communities. But if Trent comes up, or if Simon comes up with this idea, hey, I want to work full time on Harburger tax, and there's the token engineering community wants to support him, but then there's also a radical exchange community too, and they want to support him. They can actually just fund the same milestone, and you would only have to apply for funding once. And if Vitalik wants to throw 1,000, Ether in straight up, then boom, he can do that too.
So we have this explainer diagram, which is a little bit dense and needs a bit of unpacking, but this essentially shows that so within a cyber physical commons, there are multiple entry points to the outside economy. So what Griff was just explaining is here we have the ability for people to buy in through or support through the bonding curve. That will issue them. Sorry, is this big enough? Can I make it a bit bigger? Let's see if I can do that. So here we have people who are supporting through the bonding curve. They're issued tokens through which they can participate in conviction voting. Conviction voting, once it reaches a threshold, funds the proposals in the Giveth DApp. Work is done in the Giveth DApp, and this is our sort of material output of the commons. And also we have some interesting mechanisms where, maybe this is getting a little bit too deep, but when funds are issued, they're rebonded into the curve. So essentially what we're trying to do is create efficient economic mechanisms. So we want as few losses, monetary losses in this system as possible. So by rebonding into the curve, we kind of create a buyback situation that creates incentives within the economy to keep that money within the economy. So we expect people, if they are doing work in this economy, they may need to take some money out to pay their bills, to buy groceries, etc. But we are essentially encouraging people to reinvest into the economy is the term I'm looking for. And if that economy is producing good work, then more value will flow into that economy. However, there are also other ways that the outside economy can just fund this work. If Vitalik says, hey, this is a really important initiative, I'm just going to fund directly through a grant or a donation into the pool where that work can get done. He doesn't want to participate in the governance. He doesn't want to potentially see a return through the bonding curve. He just wants to straight donate. We have an open donation platform in the Giveth DApp where funds can be allocated without having to go through the governance and everything else. So there are multiple ways that that this economy can receive sustainable funding.
Okay, cool.
We also, I mean, a little bit of a down the road topic, but we're looking also at implementing like Harburger taxes on the material outputs of these economies that can serve as another input of funding for future commons initiatives. That's a little bit down the road.
Yeah, cool.
So a little bit about our design principles. So this is a lot of this is coming from the complex system design. A lot of these components are being designed biomimetically. So we're using all sorts of sorry, I'm losing my train of thought a little bit. Zargham is designing these from mathematical first principles. So he is defining some sort of core relation between reserve and supply in the bonding curve, for example, which kind of serve as like an economic conservation law. So once you define that conservation law, I mean, this is how we build skyscrapers and how we build space shuttles, right? There are certain conservation laws in the physical world, whether it's F equals ma or conservation of mass, conservation of energy, that we can derive higher order mathematics that all come down to that conservation principle, and that's why they hold. So this is where I think the Commons Stack is coming at this from a very interesting angle, because we're basically deriving higher order mathematics off of these economic conservation principles. And that's why we believe that these will be robust at scale. And of course, it's baby steps for the time being. We're starting crawling before we can walk, before we can run. But that's also kind of the viable systems approach. We're building these module by module. And it's like anything, any complex system. When you buy a car, the engine is a module, the brakes are a module. Those can be replaced piecewise without having to replace the whole platform. So this is how we're coming at the design of the Commons Stack as well, where there may be in the future multiple governance modules, and you can pick the one that most suits your purpose. And if that doesn't, you can swap it out for another one. So we're really coming at this from a modular system design rather than saying decentralize to our platform. We're saying decentralize and take these components, and then we have this sort of emergent economy of various commons, and the ones that are put together best will incur more of the market value, and the ones that aren't working will probably wither away and die. So we're sort of introducing that Darwinian evolution market process into it as well.
Cool. Yeah, no, I just really like the approach. One question I have with the roadmap, like what are the largest risks that you guys see?
Well, obviously, roadmap
like with this modular approach. What? Sorry.
Roadmap delays are a huge risk, of course, for anything. We're trying to stay very milestone focused and based, so that people to mitigate that, so that like, because we're not going to build the augmented bonding curve, for instance. Like we have technical advisory teams, but we're going to actually put out. I was a chemical engineer back in the day, and this is just how we did it. You know, we would actually get quotes from vendors that can build it, pick our favorite vendor based off of the price and the quality of work that we could expect from them, and then have them do it. And so I've seen what Argonne has done with their milestone approach and in the NEST grants, and it's been very efficient. Although there's still delays, the incentivization is correct, right? Like they get paid when they get the job done. So the biggest risk for us is that we choose the wrong vendor, and they can't complete the product in the time allotted, or we have to restart. So we do have buffer, a sizable amount of buffer that we expect to use in those situations, but then we'll have these delays. The other big risk I see for this project to be success is how we explain the narrative and the approach, because it's very different and novel. Framing it as a donation is a question, if that's something that will turn people off or turn people on, and just getting people to understand that it is a complex system, and that they're not going to understand everything in half an hour. It's hard to really give someone the whole picture in like bullet points, and that they'll just get it. That's also a huge risk for us.
For sure. The complexity is probably one of the biggest issues that we come up against, because we explain this to someone and they say, wow, this sounds amazing, but you need to explain that in 2 minutes to really, you know, capture the interest of donors who might be interested in supporting this. And unfortunately, it's quite a convoluted system that we're trying to pull together from all directions. So that's one of the biggest difficulties we've come up against so far.
We're mitigating it by our audience, by trimming our audience down to token engineers and governance experts, but it's still a challenge. It's still going to be a challenge.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I can appreciate that. So in terms of the vendors, how many potential vendors are there out there right now?
Oh, there's
that you guys have talked to.
There's surprisingly a lot. So we've gotten quotes from you know, more, not a little bit better than back of the envelope quotes, you know, from Aragon Black for the token bonding curve. They already have the fundraising app, which I'm working with them relatively closely on. But for the augmented bonding curve, we could go to Aragon Black, but we could also go to the DAO Stack group, which we're connected to, and they have actually, they were in our hackathon, 2 hackathons with us. The D-Org guys who are working on a token bonding curve implementation for them. And then there's also Autark, which I'm very close with. And I don't think Aragon 1 would do it, but we would talk to them about it. And I really don't think that they're looking at putting time into building stuff like that for groups. But then, you know, there's also other groups like Protofire and more, you know, very talented dev teams that they don't necessarily have direct experience with token bonding curves, but they don't have to, because Zargum Block Science is doing all the design work. And so we will have a very detailed specification that we can put out to the vendors. So while I'm really hoping to get people who can add in extra checks on the design, talking with Zargum, if for some reason all of those guys are booked, there's lots of dev teams out there that can follow a specification. And then for conviction voting, which is a very challenging spec, it's all those groups plus, but we got our quotes from level K.
Cool.
Seem to be a number of options, and there's a lot of excitement about these components as well. So I imagine once we start explaining them through these component explainer articles and speccing them out, I think we'll have a lot of interest in various teams to help with the build. We've definitely had a lot of people reaching out already, expressing interest. Great. So I'll jump into quickly our fundraising strategy and just try to explain that a little bit. So essentially, yeah, going through the augmented bonding curve and the hatch parameters is important for initial donors to understand. We are not building a system for speculative profit making. We are trying to build new economic paradigms which are sustainable for the communities that are using them. So we are trying to avoid sort of third-party investment and third-party value extraction. We're not looking to make a ton of money for investors as a traditional, you know, ICO or fundraise may do. So, I mean, this is, however, we do believe that there is value to donors for being on this Token Engineering Commons whitelist. And as we talked about before, there's kind of this hatch phase for the curve leading to the open phase. Anybody who participates in the hatch phase is likely to see a fair amount of appreciation in those tokens for that community. However, there is an air gap between those communities and the common stack. The common stack is not launching these curves. The common stack is not producing a token. So this is where we're hoping to keep this legal separation from the donations to the common stack. And going through our iteration, so I believe you've looked through this a bit before. As we talked about earlier, the first iteration will be basically the bonding curve, so that first puzzle piece. And we will take an off-the-shelf, probably Aragon DAO, use an escrow service that is very simple, not these components we're talking about. So we're basically looking to launch the bonding curve into the wild, and the hatch price for those tokens would be about 10 cents. So that means that initial supporters, the people on the Token Engineering Commons whitelist, would be able to participate and support the community at 10 cents per token. Once the curve goes into its open phase, those tokens will be worth 30 cents perhaps, or maybe even higher. And everyone who is participating in the hatch has to abide by this token vesting curve. This is a half-life decay curve. So 50% of the tokens will be unlocked in 4 months or less. And then 87.5% of those tokens will be unlocked about 16 months or less. So this is basically ensuring that the people who initialize this curve are around for the long haul. We don't want
just a quick check. It's actually after 6 months, it will be unlocked. There's a 2-month cliff at the beginning where anybody who buys in the hatch phase, they can't sell their tokens for 2 months. And it's really interesting because then it effectively allows for an open, it's right in the text. It's just like maybe the 2-month cliff should be said before or something, because there's a 2-month cliff where there's effectively another bonding curve hatch, another initialization, because these people, the people who are experts in this field, and the group that we want to have large governance rights in this community, they get to buy in early, but their tokens are locked. And then also a percentage of the money that they put in will go to a funding pool directly, right? So they get a really good deal on tokens, but then they're also only let's say 50% or some percentage will be going to buying tokens, and the rest of the money will actually be going towards like a donation effectively to a funding pool. But then during that 2-month phase, everyone knows their tokens are locked. So now you have another token bonding curve that anyone can initialize and anyone can put in, and there'll be that race, that token bonding curve race that happens where people buy, people sell, and there'll be a lot of volatility. So
I guess the value of the hatch tokens initially, this is for right now is like the funds you're raising now is the hatch phase. It is the like initial hatch phase funds, correct?
So kind of. So the donations that we receive, we have like multipliers, and I think Jeff will get to that in a second. But basically anyone who donates to us, they get on the whitelist, and then that allows them to initialize the bonding curve.
I got you.
Put in more money later, but we're not issuing a token. We're allowing communities to use the code that we create to bootstrap their own development as a DAO. And we will start off fully decentralized, and the Common Stack group doesn't have any, none of the money that comes to us goes to these curves. They will be initialized on their own. The community will bootstrap their own project using our code. But it will have this whitelist in there, and anyone who donated to us will now be able to actually be part of that initialization phase where they get the sweetheart deal on tokens.
Okay.
So perhaps explain a little bit better with this diagram. So the first iteration will be the augmented bonding curve, and we won't be implementing any of these other components in the first iteration. We'll just be using an off-the-shelf DAO, the Giveth DApp as it exists now, and no analytics dashboard, just to give a quick visual summary on that. And the second iteration will be the augmented bonding curve connected with a refactored Giveth donation app. So this is the fund escrow service. Our third iteration will include conviction voting. And the fourth iteration will include that Commons analytics dashboard.
And that analytics dashboard will be across all the other initialized bonding curves. Like they'll be able to track so if you are allocating funds to a project that will track how that project is working, how it is performing, the various metrics around it. Is there any trouble you see there? Like, just off the top of my head, like each project will have its own metrics that will be important, right? So
Yeah.
I suppose it's open source, right? So I guess that will be the project's prerogative to add which KPIs they want to
Right.
add
And
into that dashboard.
we're looking to create kind of like a blueprint library. So we might produce a component that says, okay, this, and this are useful data points for us to measure. If you feel like you need to add additional ones, right, it's all well documented open source code. And all of these are upgradable as well. So we're thinking that these will be 4 different communities that are launching these iterations. So the first community that only got, or any community that doesn't have the Commons dashboard, for example, the first 3 that we launch, they can upgrade as these components become available. So they can include the analytics dashboard, even if they were in on the first iteration. These will all be upgradable economies. Yeah.
And one of the things on that is, we're going to really like handhold 4 different field test commons, but of course, like you said, everything's open source. So we're going to have a community competition and create a Schelling point around one community, like that everyone is like, oh yeah, this is the one that the token engineering commons whitelist has kind of like rallied behind. And then, and we'll have a little competition for that so we can understand what should be the first community and second community and third. But then, of course, the people who maybe lost that competition, they just won't get the extra support that we're going to give and the extra attention that everyone will have. So we expect there to be many commons and many people using the first iteration and the second iteration. But we're going to really focus in on one community for each iteration.
So a quick question. I mean, so is this only honed in on ETH, or could this potentially work on other networks?
We're actually not. We're not even saying what network okay. We are using Solidity, and we expect it to be done on XDAI. Honestly, that's kind of our target. But, we're not going to commit to any chain or any plan there. It depends on the vendors that apply and that we find that want to run the spec. But I would expect it to be all on XDAI. That's our current plan.
Yeah, no, I asked because I mean, I could see this potentially kind of propagating across networks. Just be cool. I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts on how that would interoperate. If that'd be tricky, if that would increase the vendor risk, it might make it more hard to communicate.
Our focus will be on the token engineering design and laying out the specs of these components. Ultimately, we're working on a lower level of the stack here. We're making sure these components are rigorously defined mathematically and robustly spec'd out. And then, if that is done in Solidity by one team, great. If that is done, on any other protocols, definitely we're fairly agnostic in that way. Whichever one makes sense to work with, we're happy to see it propagate there.
I mean, I would love for this stuff to end up on Substrate eventually. I'm not going to lie. I think that they're going the right direction with making your own chain that's application specific but it's none of it's tested, and we're just trying to work with what we know. I'll say I'm a validator on XDAI, so I'm a little biased towards that. But we'll see where it goes.
Cool. And I guess where are you guys now with like your funding goals on the initial raise, or I guess you're calling it donations?
So we actually have about earmarked maybe around 150K from people that we can kind of count So not very much. We're pretty early. I mean, we're a little scared to go out because we're hoping to hear, you know, I'm hoping that you say, "Oh man, I found this huge hole," and then we can add that in. So because right now we're only going out to advisors and
Mm-hmm.
staying with these strategies because we're still open to changing them. Our plan right now is to really launch in the fundraising efforts in mid-August and have make a big thing at the Token Engineering Global Gathering.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really we're really trying to focus our efforts towards getting ready for that, and we're really close. You know, it feels
Cool.
like we can go out now, but we want to revise and iterate on this plan, and then we're gonna our current plan, which is something I definitely want feedback from you on, is to say that if we don't raise our enough for the first iteration, which is about $984,000, I don't think it should be that hard to get that number. But if we don't get that number, then we call it off and we give everyone their money back on September 3rd.
Yeah. I mean, I think the one thing with the roadmap that is missing, at least on the like initial read, was really what the value is for a person who's putting up that like initial amount. And for me, the value is, it's not like, I mean, obviously there might be a price appreciation, but really I think the value is really like the voting power in, it's like the voting power in the actual commons, right? And like the market's kind of hinted that those types of tokens are pretty valuable. There's I don't know if you read like the TrueBit paper, their new model, but they are incorporating like a governance token as well into their new model. So for me, I think that's a pretty compelling angle to have a governance type of token that's also liquid, that it's almost kind of like convertible equity. Like the later you convert it, the higher it's worth, maybe or maybe not. And that it kind of reminds me of the TrueBit model as well, because that's the mechanism that they're mulling around now.
Yeah, and what's really interesting is they don't just get one token; they get 6 if we raise enough. You know, if we only raise enough, then they only get 1 token. But if we raise 2 million, they get 2 tokens. If we raise, you know, around 3 million, they get 3 tokens. And if we, you know, and each one is they get to buy it for, they get the opportunity to participate in 3 initial hatch phases, right? Put in 10 cents, and at the end of that, it's 30 cents. They can't sell right away, but you know, it's also likely to go up because it's a token bonding curve, and there's clear, you know, incentive for other outside parties or even inside parties to buy more tokens. And then,
I think that has to be like clearly communicated in like the roadmap that you have. Obviously, like legally, you have to be really careful about kind of promising
returns.
Any type of return. That's not like, you know, it's just not right either, right? Because there's also who knows, but I think what's important is like the governance power, and so I think the roadmap is I think you have all the pieces there, but it seems like there's like a lot of moving pieces, and it'd be, I think, helpful to kind of like be able to make the roadmap a little simpler somehow, just make it easier to communicate, without taking away like the complexity of the actual stack. But that's my kind of reaction after reading all of the documents. Because there are a lot of moving pieces, and I think it can be. It's almost like you need a modular roadmap as well for each of the components.
Yeah, and that was ultimately the idea behind breaking this out into these various documents, although I'm realizing we almost need like a summary doc of each of these as well, because there is, there's kind of the cursory level, okay, these are the 6 iterations, and then a deep dive into each one to see exactly where that value is coming from in those iterations. And there are two further ones that we didn't discuss yet. So iteration 5 and iteration 6 are basically taking that minimum viable commons and creating a mobile first iteration on that. And then iteration 6 would be an easy to deploy, almost out of the box, one click, for communities that are not so tech heavy or integrated already into the crypto and token engineering space, just making it super easy to deploy.
So I just to on my laptops have 10% left, and it says like to service the battery. So I don't know how long it'll last, but just wanted to, I guess, if we're cut off, I wanted to ask you guys, like, where do you think that we can help you the most in this?
Well,
kind of what's like the.
I know I would love commenting wildly on these documents, and like just what you said right there is that, hey, we need a clear value proposition for the donors. It's not there. I mean, that just right there already a huge win. I mean, I don't know why we are missing that, and I know that with you guys have seen so many other projects, having that input will be huge. Making sure we're not missing any other holes, and then of course when we get when we get to the point of going outside of the advisor circle, telling us who else is in the token engineering community that we need to pass this stuff along to.
Great, yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to jump into the docs more and leave more comments. But yeah, let's absolutely continue this conversation.
Can you share?
Really cool
yeah, can you also share the audio of this conversation? The reason for that is because it gives us context on what you were thinking when we go back and review the documents again.
Yeah.
So initially it started with the summary, so it will tie up some of the gaps in between, some of the things you were explaining. That would be very helpful.
Yeah.
From my end, so that I can catch up much better to some of the stuff.
Absolutely.
Sure.
It's just an unlisted video on YouTube, so I can actually give you the link right now.
Okay, no problem.
And one note on the roadmap that you looked at probably before. So this is an internal facing document. So as far as value proposition, that's something we'll want to integrate into the member summary or one of these other documents that we walked through. Actual roadmap and hard numbers is more internal facing, and we're not looking to be spreading that to mainstream donors.
Okay, cool.
Okay, no problem.
Awesome. That helps clarify. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, and that other roadmap document is pretty it's pretty thick. There's a lot of details in there. Like Jeff said, it's not for external parties. It's really just so if you have a question about where we're getting these numbers or what we're thinking, it's there for you as a reference.
Cool. Sounds good.
Awesome.
So I think like awesome next steps is to us to just add some comments kind of in again after our call. It helps kind of point us in the right direction as to what you guys are looking for, I think. And we'll loop Eden in when he's back from holiday, and let's absolutely keep in touch and maybe plan a call in the next coming weeks.
Yeah,
Awesome.
Can we create a small little Telegram group or something or add you guys?
Yeah, of course.
I'll just make a quick one.
Yeah, cool.
That would be good, just to quickly iterate on those or answer any specific questions you guys have, and just make sure that we're
awesome.
able to incorporate all of that into these docs as it comes up.
Nice. Sounds great.
Okay, what's your guys' Telegram names?
Jeff Lefebvre. 1 second.
If you
Yeah.
create the group, I think I have you, Jeff, in one of the token engineering host groups.
Yeah, I'm in token engineering, community hosts, the CAD group, the Common Stack group also.
And
What is
and
mine?
okay.
The other one is Anesu, Anesu, and then the last name is Machoko.
MAC.
Hoko.
Is there a place to chat in here? I can just paste it in.
Yeah. And is that your name on Telegram?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Anesu.
Is there like an underscore or something?
No. Where's the chat section here? Maybe I can write it.
Yeah.
Okay, there, found it. Okay.
Okay, perfect. Oh, thank you guys. Okay, I'm adding you right now. We'll see who wins.
That's my name on Telegram.
And well, but is that your Telegram handle?
Yeah.
Hmm.
I think I should be able to find.
Yeah. And these two.
That's right. Actually, I have to hop off, guys. I have another call,
Okay.
but
Yeah.
if I haven't been added in the next 10 minutes, I'll message one of you. I probably be able to search you on like the groups.
Yeah.
We're all a part of token engineering group. I think so.
Perfect.
All right.
Thanks, Jeff.
Great, awesome guys. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Thanks. And
See ya. Bye.
Thanks, guys.
well, hopefully Jeff can add an ASU because I could not find.
Yeah, I can't see an ASU either, but I think I will be able to add Jeff here. Okay, Jeff's in.
Let's see. And you know what? I kind of just for this live. Well, maybe not. I'll end the live stream. I was thinking, should we add in some information on the roadmap document, or for the live stream, or just let that slide?
You mean go through it right now, just you and me, and they can watch it later?
Yeah.
Let's see. Is there anything in particular? I guess we didn't cover milestone or multipliers.
Yeah, we didn't cover multipliers at all, actually, but
And
they're
we
pretty
did.
basic. So
Yeah.
I'll just say it now because we're talking about the multipliers. If they're basically teamed up with the iteration amounts, the amount that we need to raise for each iteration. So the advisors get 3x on the multiplier. Basically, anyone with their face on our website gets a 3x multiplier. And then so if they donate 1,000 DAI or whatever there is, I assume DAI. If they donate 1,000 DAI, then they'll get 3,000 DAI worth of ability on the whitelist. So when we do all the commons, they will get to put in 3,000 into the commons if they want. And then there'll be a specific date that they have to do that to receive the 3x. And then the other one is 2.5x. So for the first iteration. So if we get enough funds to get to the first iteration, then anyone who gave us those funds, they get 2.5x multiplier. Then between the first and second iteration, any donation at that point gets a 2 multiplier. And then from the second iteration to the third iteration, that amount, any donation we receive in that time period gets 1.5 multiplier. And then any donation after the third iteration is just straight 1 for 1. Hopefully that makes sense.
Is there anything else in the roadmap doc that you specifically wanted to cover?
Mahoots a little bit, and how we're going to kind of structure the like shelling point around one community for each commons, and just like that we're going to support these groups with funding so that they can organize themselves effectively, given the lessons that we've learned from the various DAOs, from the DAO all the way to the Argonne Co-op. There's been a lot of lessons about how do we organize these groups and how do we organize a DAO and what is required, and also lessons from Eleanor Ostrom, and building communities around causes is not as simple as, hey, let's start a chat room. There is a little bit of structure and community organizing that's required, and we're gonna select people. We're going to help guide them through that process and give them an opportunity to build it themselves as well, and support them in their efforts of doing that. So that's just like a piece.
Right, so that we didn't cover that in the diagram earlier, but the mahouts that Griff mentioned are these community stewards who will kind of stand between. They're the people manning the community center. This tech community center that we are providing these communities. So the token holders will participate in governance and receive proposal funding, and the community stewards kind of stand in between, helping to make sure that the needs of this community are being met by the technology and in a seamless way.
Yeah.
So there's funding built into each of our iterations to help pay for this team of community stewards to make sure that all community issues are being reported and iterated on in future designs.
Yep.
Was there anything else in the roadmap doc? I mean, a lot of this, I feel like this is pretty deep dive.
Yeah, I mean, also the roadmap, like they mentioned having a module-focused roadmap as well,
right?
And that's, I think, something that we can pull out of this, which
Yeah.
is like the CAD roadmap, the augmented bonding curve roadmap,
Yeah.
the conviction vote, the DAO roadmap, the Giveth DApp roadmap, the analytics dashboard roadmap. Each one of those is like, for iteration 1, they have this piece, and that's what's in here. That's just it's not in any way, it's really just thrown together, but it kind of says, hey, for the conviction voting, we start with this spec, and then for iteration 4 we add delegations. For iteration 5, mobile first. For iteration 6, easy to play. For augmented bonding curve, we start with this, time-based vesting, no UI, or just like very basic UI. And then second one, we actually have a front end built for it. The third one, we have a KPI-based vesting on that. And now we also have conviction voting integration. And then on the fourth one, we have dashboard integration, and we have basically just more iterations. After that, it just becomes like how do we improve it? I think we might have added GraphQL in the fourth iteration. No, fourth iteration is really just focused on the last systems design, and then we add GraphQL in the mobile first version. And just I feel like that's kind of it's effectively just the overviews for each iteration.
Right. I think that's what we need to do is more. I just pulled up this doc as an example. Like we can be very high level summary and then link to the deep dive. You want to. So here are 6 iterations: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Each one being a link into a detailed roadmap for that iteration. Rather than having it as one massive doc, we can split it out into sort of like summary and deep dive.
Yeah. Yeah, and the high-level system overview probably needs an abstract even. For sure, the fundraising plan, because that's what I hear when they say, hey, we need to have like a clear value proposition. I feel like that's basically like an abstract to the fundraising plan. Our clear value proposition. Donate to us, get on the whitelist. The whitelist will allow you to purchase tokens at 10 cents, and the price coming out this is a parameter in our design. You know, we can say the price coming out will be 30 cents, and that we expect, and I think we can also say now in that open phase, we expect the price to go up and down because, you know, all of the tokens are locked, and that there will be more interest in participating in the open phase because of those locked tokens. So the price, if other people decide to initialize the curve, which any token engineer would be like, well, yeah, they will, you know, if we can communicate that appropriately, then the price will be higher than 30 cents. And so there is a huge return potential. The challenge is that when they start selling, you know, if people start selling their asset, just like if people start selling their Amazon stock, the price is going to go to nothing. So it's important that they utilize their governance powers to actually make this something people want to donate to. And that's another thing that I don't think we're even really mentioning in here, is that this is a better form of donations. There are groups that support token engineering research right now, and instead of them just donating, now they can buy a financial asset and use that to allocate funds to the exact same groups that they would donate to.
Yes, that was succinct. I like that.
Yeah, well, here's hoping. I mean, this is the angle that I've been really hitting home with normal people, is like, listen, like nonprofit organizations, they can't compete in the current economic models that we use today. But, you know, I've been really going into Jeff Bezos because it's just such a good example. You know, he's the richest fucking man in the world, and he has more money than, like, I think it's like 6x the profits Amazon has ever created. You know, Amazon made $10 billion in profits last year, and he has $130 billion. How does that make any sense at all? Like, Amazon's only ever made $25 billion in profit, ever, total. Why does
evolution?
Yeah, financial assets. Being able to create a financial asset, and the value of that financial asset is derived subjectively, right? Like, you don't need to quantify an economic model. You don't need a quantified economic model to determine the value of a financial asset. Value of a financial asset is determined subjectively, qualitatively. And so now we can create financial assets for nonprofit organizations, and the value for that financial asset will be qualitatively evaluated by the people, by the open market, based off of the value of that organization and what they bring to the world. Even though we don't have a good economic model for it, we don't need it. Amazon was losing money for the first 10 years, and they still had a decent market cap. You know, they weren't creating value. They were losing money, you know, they were losing value, but there was belief in a future value. And there was also belief that, hey, I want Amazon to exist. Now here we don't have a belief in a future economic value, but we do have subjective value for token engineering research, or Ethereum Commons research, or trash cleanup. You know, there is value there. We don't need the economic model. I don't know. I feel like that has been really hitting home with normal people.
Yeah.
And especially explaining effectively that the whole financial industry is a fucking scam. Now, I don't know. I always want to go into that. I don't think it helps us that much, but so I don't recommend it. But it works well with conspiracy theorists, that's for sure.
Yeah, we'll get them on our side, no problem.
Yeah.
All right, cool. I got to run. I got an appointment coming up here, but I think that was good. If you wouldn't mind dropping the live stream or the unlisted link into the Telegram channel, because I'm still not exactly sure where to find those, then that would be good for them. And I'm realizing these docs still need more work, so that's going to be my priority for the next little bit.
Yeah. Hey, man, great work at leading this thing. If you want some feedback on it, we can talk later. But honestly, you kicked ass. It was really fantastic. It was very well explained. So nice work.
Cool. Thank you. Working on that. Working on the pitch. It's an hour, and we didn't even get through all the things we wanted to get through. So
that's definitely the biggest challenge.
More summaries. I'm realizing more summaries. Even as I go through these docs, like it's good to get all the information out, but then we go through again with a fine-tooth comb and be like, okay, all of that information can stay in the deep dive, and now we need to distill out like the 2-sentence summary of how this is going to work into a summary doc with a link to there's more to come.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this could be thrown into a giant FAQ, and then we just link to these different concepts, and it's like our FAQ is this giant link thing.
Yeah. For sure.
Okay, but yeah, man. Good luck with eye appointment, right?
Thank you. It is. How'd you know?
You told Lorelei earlier.
Okay.
I didn't even know you wore glasses.
Yeah, gonna go get some glasses so I can work longer than 12 hours a day without going CrossFit.
That's the spirit.
You should get the blue light protection thing, the like screen. Yeah.
I have what's this called? Screen shader. Is that what you mean? Like for nighttime or just in general?
It's like in general. Like my glasses have it. They kind of shine purple and they have like natural or unnatural light on them. But also, I just found out that the like scratch proof coating is like totally busted, and oftentimes it fails and creates more scratches if your glasses ever get steam on them. So don't fall for that shit. I did.
Okay, so don't bother with scratch proof and go for the blue light.
Yeah.
Blue light protection. Ending the live stream. I hope someone enjoyed that advice.